afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone besides. Welcome to the first episode of Great Truths of Reality. I'm your host, Seamus Callahan. In this series, we'll be searching for answers to the world's most pressing questions, from the nature of reality to how to run a government. We'll be using the highest standards of logic, evidence, elegance, and empathy to help us make the best decisions we can in our lives. And with that, let's get on with the first episode. Now, I don't expect you to accept everything I say. I merely ask that you don't dismiss it outright, that you try your hardest to listen and consider, without judgment of me or the ideas I present, especially the things that you don't like. After all, I know things that you don't, just as you know things that I don't. I don't presume to know more than you, I merely know differently from you. Likewise, don't presume to know more than me. You simply know differently from me. The burden of evidence is on both of us to provide to support our beliefs and positions. Today, we're going to talk about the greatest truths of reality, the fundamental, absolute ones that can't be reasonably disputed. Now, you might be asking yourself, indisputable truths? What do you mean, indisputable truths? I can dispute them all I like. Don't worry, we've got you covered. The first question to ask is, why do we want to find indisputable truths? What use are they? The answer is, they help us establish safe baseline assumptions upon which we can prove other great truths to use in our daily lives. A bit of a warning, I'm going to do this in two parts due to some time constraints in my schedule, so be on the lookout for part 2. Assumptions are dangerous. If you try to build an argument on an assumption that isn't proven, that argument could easily fall apart if the assumption isn't true. For example, many arguments for the existence of God build off the assumption that God exists in the first place. But if that assumption isn't true, then the whole argument becomes meaningless. In this particular case, people make major life decisions based on their beliefs, decisions that could possibly cause problems for them or for other people. You know what they say about assumptions. Assumptions make an ass out of umptions. That said, we still need to find assumptions. If we don't make any assumptions whatsoever, then how can we justify any of our decisions? So how do we find reasonable assumptions? There are two kinds of assumptions we can make: absolute truths and practical assumptions. There are very few absolute truths, and we're going to examine them here today. These are truths for which there are either no alternatives, or it is indisputably evident that the alternatives are false. The other sort of assumption is practical assumptions. Practical assumptions can't be definitively proven, but can be established through several means. 1. The evidence overwhelmingly supports them, such that the alternatives require more unproven assumptions, and therefore become significantly less probable. 2. The alternatives are utterly useless. You can't do anything with them. For instance, what if we live in a computer simulation? What are you going to do about it? Escape? How? Do you have any sound evidence to support that belief in the first place? Probably not. Thus, it's not a good practical assumption to say that we live in the Matrix. 3. Arguments based on other practical assumptions. They're typically pretty solid. I want to take a moment to distinguish between the universe and reality. The universe is this thing which we experience all around us, that we take measurements of to determine its properties. Reality is that which exists. It is possible that the universe isn't an accurate representation of reality. There are many possible alternatives to the universe that we see. Your brain receives everything it knows through sensory input. What if that sensory input is thoroughly wrong? How would you know? How do you know your whole life isn't a hallucination? You could just be a thought in the mind of God. We could all be living in a detailed computer simulation. Our universe could be just one of many spiritual planes. Here's a famous fun one. The universe could have come into being last Thursday, with the thoughts being put into your head last Thursday, with photons being hung in space last Thursday. One more that I'm very fond of, static. That's a complicated one, and we'll talk about that one another time. Side note. As it happens, it actually is safe to assume that the universe is an accurate description of reality, but the justification for that will have to come later. So what is safe to assume? What are the greatest truths of reality? The first truth, ironically, is that there kind of aren't any. Because they all rely on one practical assumption, and that is that logic works. All of the following could, theoretically, be wrong if logic is not a component of reality. But we won't worry ourselves with that one, because the possibility of logic not being a component of reality would be useless. What would you do with that information? Nothing, because nothing would have reason to it. The second great truth is that reality, regardless of its description, exists, pretty much by definition. We can almost imagine reality not existing. Not really, we typically just imagine a void, which the void would then exist, so that's different from reality not existing. It's complicated. But it is evident from our experience that something somehow exists. That leads us to our third great truth. Our experience of reality exists, regardless of the existence of the thing being experienced. The proof, again, is simply that it is evident. You are experiencing this video right now. The video might not be real, you could just be hallucinating, but the experience is real. The experience exists. It is evident. And those are, barring the technicality implicit in the first one, the absolute truths of reality. Now, what are the basic practical assumptions? The first is that logic is a component of reality, which I explained above. The second is that the universe is, at least in part, an accurate description of reality. We have no solid evidence to believe otherwise, and even if we did, what would we do with that information? Escape the simulation? That's like a video game character trying to jump out of the screen. Change the mind of God? Good luck with that. Third, and most important, is the meaning of life, but the proof of that is complicated, which is why I'm saving that for the next episode of Great Truths of Reality. Thanks to the Duderstadt Center at the University of Michigan for allowing me to use this recording studio. Thanks to my teacher, Alexander Weinstein, for giving me the assignment that incentivized me to make this production. Thanks to you, the viewer, for watching all the way through this video so that it wasn't a waste of my time to make. Special thanks to Bernie Sanders for giving Americans hope that real change is possible. And very, very special thanks to tardigrades for being the only animals known to be able to breed in the vacuum of space. That's all we have time for our show today. Join me next time when we dig into the real interesting stuff and prove the meaning of life. Thanks again, and have a magnificent day. Bye-bye.